Welcome back to Nerds Explain It All. I'm Lance,
I'm Nancy.
And I'm Zach.
and today we are going to be celebrating Black History Month on the show. We're going to have a discussion and and just an all around like celebration of the achievements of African Americans on nerd culture. It is obviously February, Black History Month, and it's not only just Black history, but it's history for everybody because it's important that everybody understands that we that as an African American that we our contributions are meaningful, and not saying, and this is not discounting other people's, but since this is Black History Month, I figured that this will be a good time to discuss African Americans' role in nerd culture as at large and as a whole.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, because there are some really good things out there, and there's also some things that people probably aren't really that much of aware of, which is why we have to bring these things to light. So it's not this is not like me standing on a soapbox and saying, "How dare you not know about this?" But just as more of an educational type of thing of this is what's out here, this is cool, this was significant. So I guess basically today, I had something that I wanted to talk about, but I guess kind of wanted to see what you guys kind of brought to the table. Like what's I guess significant part of nerd culture that has been affected by African Americans, or heightened because of an African American presence, do you guys look to first? Like, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, to me, I'm a Star Trek guy first and foremost. That's my flag I fly. My geek flag is Star Trek, and obviously you have to go with Captain Benjamin Sisko from
That's
Star
my
Trek:
dude.
Deep Space Nine,
I love that guy.
or from seasons 1 through 3, Commander Benjamin Sisko from Star Trek: Deep Space Nine, which I think kind of hones in on the problem.
Yeah,
now,
that's some bullshit.
I'm a Star Trek aficionado, so I know the behind the scenes story on
Yes.
this. Obviously, it looks bad, to be like the first black main character, the first black star is
The lead, yeah.
the first. There we go, the lead actor, because obviously Star Trek has really. It's been a very progressive science fiction series for almost 50 years. Nichelle Nichols played Lieutenant Uhura on the original series. She didn't have much to do, but the fact that she was just there and treated like an equal was very important. She had the first interracial kiss with William Shatner on American television in the horrible third season of Star Trek, but it was still a significant moment in television history. And then Next Generation, of course, you got LeVar Burton, who is what is American pop culture without LeVar Burton? I mean, he's in Roots, he's in Star Trek, he's in Reading Rainbow. I mean, no matter who you are or where you're from,
Talk about that
guy.
Talk about three iconic roles that just define your career like that. Like, he doesn't have to have this long list of things. It's just boom, like Kunta, Reading Rainbow, Star Trek. I mean, those are pretty really
he's part of
things.
everything,
Yeah, exactly.
And so, Geordi LaForge was, he was an underdeveloped character on Next Gen. But everybody liked him. He's probably one of the best actors on there. So Star Trek has always been putting African Americans front and center. In the 80s, that wasn't that big a deal because we kind of we gone past a certain point. It was a bigger deal in the 60s. Now,
Yes.
in the 90s, 1993 is when Star Trek: Deep Space Nine premiered, and that was my choice as I'm burying the lead as I always do. Avery Brooks played Captain Sisko on Deep Space Nine. He was the commander of the station. Now, when they initially conceived the character of Sisko, they thought he'd be a younger guy, and a younger, inexperienced guy. So that's why they made him a commander. And also, I was just a way to differentiate it from what had come before. You had Captain Kirk and Captain Picard. Now you're not on a ship, you're on a space station. So, let's have a commander to mix it up. So that was the logic behind it. I know it's you look back on it in hindsight, you're like, man, why did they make the first black lead a commander, not a captain? Now, he eventually got his promotion, at the end of season 3. Avery Brooks is a very charismatic actor, to say the least. He was famous for the show Spencer for Hire, where he played the character Hawk. And I think he actually had a spin-off, too, a short-lived spin-off, just Hawk or something. But he had a very distinctive look, shaved head, goatee. That was his look, And when they cast him in Star Trek, they said, look, we got to get away from that. We need people to not see you as, Hawk. So he, grew his hair out, shaved his goatee, and was pretty unrecognizable.
Yeah.
But the longer they went with Sisko, the more he became Avery Brooks.
Yes.
And he eventually, by season 4, he was back to being Space Hawk. It was me and my dad. Me and my dad always called him Space Hawk
Yeah.
because there was a in television video game called Space Hawk. So we always called Captain Sisko Space Hawk. And I think a problem, as part of our discussion here, is talking about how does nerd culture like manifest these characters, because they want it, their heart's in the right place, but their mind doesn't know quite what to do with it, So with Captain Sisko, who's a very underdeveloped character, unfortunately, the first, Lance and I recently rewatched a lot of Deep Space Nine, and I swear, like the first season and a half, he's like not
he
a
didn't
character.
he didn't have anything to do.
I mean, he had one of the most compelling backstories because in the pilot, well, this is very steeped in Star Trek lore, but one of the most famous Star Trek episodes is called Best of Both Worlds. It's where Picard, Patrick Stewart, gets assimilated by the Borg. Everybody knows the Borg, the cyborg villains. So he becomes a bad guy for a couple of episodes, and there's a battle of Wolf 359. It's like basically Wolf 359 is like the 9/11 of the Star Trek universe.
Yes.
Okay, so like the Borg sweep through Federation space, and they wipe out the Federation fleet, and they're going straight to Earth, and the Enterprise is the only one to stop them. But you don't think about, like, there's people on these ships, there's families, and one of the most, genius moves, I think, of Deep Space Nine was their main character, Captain Sisko, Avery Brooks' character, was a first officer on one of these ships, and his wife died in the attack, and he couldn't save her, but he did have a son. So after Wolf 359, it was just Captain Sisko and his son Jake, and he was a widower,
Yeah.
And a big part of the pilot of Deep Space Nine is he has to interact with Picard. And Picard doesn't know that he's, he was Locutus, it was his Borg name, and he had done this to Captain Sisko. So Sisko kind of has an attitude with him. He's like, Picard's like, oh, have we met before? He's like, yes, sir, in battle at Wolf 359. Picard's like, oh, shit.
Yep.
So, it was very interesting. It was a bold choice to kind of pit the new captain against the old captain that way, And by the end of the pilot, 2-hour pilot, they come to terms and they respect each other. They shake hands and go their separate ways. But it was a very strong introduction to Sisko, because the whole pilot of Deep Space Nine revolved around him meeting these non-linear aliens and teaching them about baseball, which is how he... because non-linear aliens didn't understand the concept of time.
Yeah.
And so he uses baseball to explain time to him, which, being a baseball fan myself, I thought that was great. So so Sisko really had a lot of personality like that. Like he had, once they allowed him to be himself, after that pilot, he like went away and had no character for almost 2 years.
Yeah, well, and granted, like they were still trying to figure out the show, what they were doing, the direction, and as well as the characters, because that was a pretty strong ensemble cast that they had on DS9.
Very big, strong, very big cast, very strong cast. So everybody needed their moment, and like you're right, everybody had to find their footing. But I think it's always, and we'll get into this the more we talk, but it's tough for people. I don't know, people, they, the man, the powers that be, whatever word you want to use, like to properly feel like they're doing justice to African American characters, because they want to do it right when they're afraid of doing it wrong, so they do nothing. Right? That's the danger.
Yes.
That's why Geordi on Next Generation, like he was like Data's best friend. He was kind of the funny guy. Then they made him the engineer. But basically, he was that guy with the thing on his eyes. You know? Like Geordi was blind. His character on Next Generation, he had a thing called a visor, which allowed him to see. So that was more like he was the blind guy more so than the black guy. On Next Generation. And Captain Sisko, he had a son Jake with him, and Jake is one of the best characters in Star Trek as far as children go.
Yes,
because he is the anti-Wesley Crusher. Wesley Crusher is just annoying and just. I don't like Wesley Crusher because he's a genius, wonder kid. Oh, I'm gonna go to Starfleet. You can't relate to that kid. He's a freaking genius. He's 14. They're letting him fly the spaceship. I'm like, it's the flagship of the Federation. Are you kidding me? So with Jake, they took a different approach, and he didn't want to join Starfleet, and he had to have that conversation with his dad, who had just assumed he would follow his footsteps. He became a writer. So lots of different stories. Now Sisko himself was a cook. His dad was a cook, had a restaurant in New Orleans. His dad was played by Brock Peters, who is famous for being in To Kill a Mockingbird. So he was an iconic African American actor. So and you really felt that like family legacy with all the characters. Like there were a few episodes where all three of them were together, and it was just it was very well done. And Avery Brooks really like I was saying he injected more and more of himself into the character as the series went on. Like he'd wear, for lack of a better word, African clothing, in his off time.
It's more Afrocentric things he would wear.
Some what you would think of like Arsenio Hall would wear, you know,
like in the 90s,
yeah.
like that's kind of what he was
These
doing.
crazy like pattern vests and pantsuit looking things, and just in his casual time, and it wouldn't be a big deal. That's who he is, and they never made a point. There was never like a very special episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, right? Where there's like a racist captain or something like that. The great thing about science fiction is they frame it in other ways.
Yes.
So they never really had to. That was never an issue. He was the captain.
It was very obvious on that show that Cisco was large and in charge on that station. Like, especially like, with his battles with Kira, like, because Kira was very headstrong,
A strong female character, the second officer.
Yeah. And so, those two would butt heads a lot, but at the end of the day, she knew not to mess with the Cisco. So
I love his acting style. I mean, because to me the big three of Star Trek, the only Star Trek that matters is original series, Next Generation, and Deep Space Nine. So like all the captains are like the best actors. Because Shatner has his Shatnerism, and Picard has his Shakespeareanism. His speeches and flowery language, and Cisco just gets so like just loud and mad and like staccato. Like when it's just like, man, you can tell like when they turn it on, they really turn it on. I love when one of the later seasons, Dax and Cisco are old friends, and she's telling Cisco that he intimidates Worf.
Yeah.
Cisco just like laughs out loud. He's like, I intimidate Worf.
Yeah, it's very funny.
But like Lance was saying, there's no question who's in charge of that station. So Lance actually had the opportunity to see him at a convention a couple years ago.
I did, and it was amazing because he is one of my heroes. I mean, I love Avery Brooks. I love DS9. It's my favorite Star Trek. And it was because especially for me, because again, like as a black man, like when you're young, looking for you're always kind of looking for a face like yours. Everybody is, but especially in especially in nerd culture, especially back then, it was just like, this is a big deal that we have a black captain in Starfleet, like, because you didn't see that every day. And so when DS9 is there, it's just like, oh wow, this is cool. And so when I got the chance to meet him, it was just a kind of a surreal experience. I got to hear him speak. He's very intelligent, very weird also, but it's cool though. Like he's self-aware that he's kind of an out there type of guy, and he kind of plays around with that sometimes. But he's a very genuine person, and people love him. You could tell, like when we were over there at when I was at Comic Palooza, like there were a lot of people there to see him, and they loved his performance and they love him. And he just brought a lot to that role, I feel, and brought a lot of dignity to it, and a lot of energy. And it was just a great thing, not only for Star Trek but nerd culture in general. And yeah, it was just a great fit. Briefly though, I want to mention I think his best work, and this is, I don't know why I don't want to say polarizing, but like there are two sides of this camp, and it's my favorite episode. It's Far Beyond the Stars.
Oh, and yeah, I was remiss in not mentioning that. I apologize. Yeah. Like as far as race being brought up, like it was brought up in a context of the past. Like,
yes. So in Far Beyond the Stars, this is like his best. I think it's his best work, and I think it's like Star Trek's best work in my opinion, because first of all, there was a whole lot of potential with the episode, and I'll explain that as I get to it. But like in this particular episode, he has a vision, because Cisco's is special in this way. He's the emissary for the prophets, and so he gets this vision, and he's transported back in time. And he's no longer Ben Cisco. He's now Benny Russell. He's a writer in what is it, 50s or so?
Yeah,
I think it's the 50s.
It's the late 1950s.
Late 1950s.
He's a writer at a science fiction magazine.
Yeah, and they're all given their task with coming up with different stories, and like he gets this picture, and it's a picture of the station as we know it on Deep Space Nine, and so he writes this story about it, and basically he writes DS9 is what he writes.
It was very meta.
Yeah,
nice.
That's extremely meta.
Especially for the 90s, before that was in vogue.
Yeah, which is why this episode is so great. And so...
but you see all the other characters...
Yeah, throughout.
Because it's
through
basically...
different lenses,
yeah, he goes into a coma, more or less, right? And when he wakes up, like, all the characters in his existence are extrapolations of the real crew on Deep Space Nine. It's kind of like Wizard of Oz, but in the reverse. Like, his vision is the quote-unquote boring life, as opposed to the fantastical sci-fi life.
Yeah. And so basically he writes DS9 and he comes back after he writes this story and he can't publish it because like his editors is like there's no way the publisher will go for a story about, as they say in the episode, a Negro captain. They'll never go for it. And they want him to change the story and he refuses. And it's one of those type of things because that's something real. That's something that really either A, probably could have happened, or B, most likely happened at some
Mm-hmm.
point, like where, an African American was denied, the chance to write his own fiction, because, the white bosses would not allow it because they're just like, there's no way that'll happen. Ha. And so, and
Mm.
he ends up getting beaten by cops.
And he
Um,
gets put in a mental
he get,
institution.
yeah, and he gets put in a mental institution because he keeps thinking about his future. And why I say this is like, this kind of represents Star Trek at its best is because his stories are what Star Trek was about, a better future, equality and like this utopian type of society where we can solve our problems and we can explore and we can focus on other things instead of the things that weigh us down now, here and now in the present.
Yeah, to,
And
to
that,
paraphrase another Star Trek episode, he was right, but at the wrong time.
yes,
So for him,
Mm.
unfortunately. So and they actually revisit that character a couple
they
seasons
do.
later, and behind the scenes story here again, they were toying with the fact that like they would end the show like with Benny Russell writing Deep Space Nine and
Yeah.
be like, oh, he was the creator of everything. But I understand why they didn't
Yeah.
because that would make some weird repercussions for Next Generation.
It would. It
original
would. But
series.
but again, like that's what I'm kind of getting to because like the potential of that. How cool would that be? Like that, like Star Trek that like is basically it's a vision of somebody who wants something better for not just himself but like for the next generation of his lineage. Like that's some pretty powerful stuff.
And and it's easy for it'd be much more powerful for someone who's experienced it to have that vision than
Yes.
some white guy like Gene Roddenberry to be like, yeah, this would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
Right.
cool. We could all get along and stuff. But like somebody like who needs this to be the future.
Yes.
Like I need to believe in this, or I can't get through my day. And then also one of the best episodes of any Star Trek, like top 10, would be an episode called The Visitor, and it's
Oh,
about
yeah, that's a great
it is specifically about the relationship between Cisco and his son Jake. And anyway, it's a great episode, and I highly recommend it.
You'll
And
cry, Nancy.
and I can you will cry.
Yay!
And I could talk about Star Trek for 5 more hours.
Yeah.
More than that, but I'll move on. But anyway, Captain Benjamin Sisko is my African American hero in their culture. So
Cool. All right, Nancy, you're up.
Wow.
yeah,
It'll be hard
follow
to
that.
follow that. When we originally suggested this topic, I thought to myself, oh, awesome, African American contributions. I thought, oh, good. Well, usually my wheelhouse that's different from you guys is video games.
Mhm.
Oh, but I already knew what I would find there. So,
Oh, no.
unfortunately. So, I mean, I kind of struggled with. I mean, I know this is a celebration of African Americans, and I think in some ways, like, it's kind of like you said, Zach, a lot of publishers, I guess, at least have made the effort, but it's still just like not good enough. Because I think unfortunately in most video games, I mean, my God, like the white confirmation bias is even more overwhelming there than it is in other areas of our society. I mean, basically, just need more representation.
I mean, I'm not a big
Flat out.
gamer. I'm not a big gamer or anything. But now that you mention it, like I'm racking my brain. I'm like, yeah.
Nope. Can't
Mhm.
think of exactly.
Right.
And more to the point, yeah, black people in general in games need to be more than sidekicks or the cool shit talking dude that's badass, but he's like 2 dimensional. Like he's not. And I'm not saying there aren't any. The first person that I did think of after a little bit of thought, and it's stupid I didn't think of him sooner. His name is Lee, and he's from the Walking Dead games from Telltale. You're introduced to Lee right away. He's a complex character. You know he committed a crime, but they do not portray him as like some like black criminal. You know the typical stereotype. Like
Mhm.
he's right away. He's very nuanced. He's very interesting, and he meets this little girl who goes on to whatever. I don't care if I spoil you.
It's cool.
I don't care if I spoil the readers. You should have played it by now. I should have played it by now, but I already know. He meets this little girl, after the zombie uprising, blah, blah, blah. He meets this little girl who's also African American named Clementine. So you're kind of
Oh,
like
my
following.
darling.
Exactly. Oh, you love Clementine so much as the player. Like you'll do anything to keep her safe. You love her, which I think is the point. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
but it's great that they show such a good I mean, it was really sad that I kept noticing. I'm like, man, this is like really good. Like, I love that. Like, it was so obvious that there weren't any stereotypes that it was jarring.
That's cool.
So, I mean, there's Lee, and of course, I mean, I know he's kind of a side character. I never saw him that way, but I understand he is. There's Cole, Augustus Cole, Coltrane from Gears of War, which
That's a
I
cool
was
name.
like, I
That's
was
a
all into Gears of War for like 3 years of my life, and I was
Ge-
obsessed.
Gears of War. Like I played that a hell of a lot.
Dude,
Like when I was
right?
in college, like especially in the
Mm-hmm.
summertime, like I was
Mm-hmm.
all about that stuff.
Me too. I was
All
all up
about
in
that
that shit.
itch.
I play it till my eyes bleed.
Oh yeah.
Good stuff. But Coltrane, you know, they didn't really do a very good job with the characterization in the game. Understandably, that it was just a shooter. I understand. But I really fell in love with the characters. I saw a lot more depth there than they really explored. And Cole, out of like their group of four dudes, well, to be fair, I guess Santiago was the, Latino dude, but two white dudes, Latino dude, and a black dude. So, I mean, they got diversity down, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Cole is definitely like a stereotype, but he's such a good one. Like he's the only positive person. He doesn't let shit ruffle him. He's the one keeping the glue. He's the glue holding all the other fucked up people together in the group.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's a good representation, but at the same time, like, why wasn't he the leader? Like, why wasn't he the star of the game? I
Hmm.
mean, and it's like the other people didn't need to be white. I mean, I think that's kind of, I hate to be a downer, but like, it makes me sad when I look at games that I love and I'm like, that dude's white, that dude's white, that dude's white, that girl's white. That's the other problem. Where are the,
The
I
black
mean, at
women.
this, oh, there are a few, there are a
Yeah.
few that I can think of right now,
Hmm.
and fighting games don't count. I want characters like with agency.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I know what you
So.
that's
mean.
why I need to get you watching Star Trek, Nancy. So
Oh no, I know you've made me listening to you guys talk about that. I'm really
Oh, it's
excited.
and especially if you ever watch DS9, you will love
I plan on
that.
it.
Yeah.
I was pretty much just gonna watch the Next Generation and DS9. That's
yeah,
it.
that's all you
Okay.
need. And
Yeah.
and,
Okay, that's what everyone said, right? I mean, more or less.
the original series movies.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I can do that.
All right.
Oh, and
It's
I
only
did
it's
want
only
to bring
12 hours of your time.
Oh, that's okay. That's a weekend. I can do it.
Yeah.
It's true.
I wanted to bring up. I know I've talked about her before, but I really like Nicole Beharie on Sleepy Hollow.
Okay.
Okay.
She's
She's hot.
oh, she's hot, but she's so fucking awesome. She's
Yep.
like awesome off. She's awesome on camera. She's awesome off camera. I think it's just more like with y'all. I think maybe with like comics and Star Trek, those I think are more like storied nerd franchise kind of things. So
Hmm.
there's been longer time for there to be diversity there,
Nancy,
like
Nancy,
to
Nancy,
sort of
Nancy.
stubbornly grow there, if
Nancy,
that
Nancy,
makes
Nancy.
sense.
Sleepy
But
Hollow is over 100 years old. That story. Okay.
okay,
Well, no, like that show.
I'm
But
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm
But I
sorry.
mean, it's kind of like I mean, there are other things I could cite, but none of
Uh-huh.
it is really fits like the topic of our the topic of our podcast. But I was thinking it's more kind of like I think the things that I'm into are more on like the edge of where African American representation is needed the most.
Hmm.
And there have been like, some inroads there, but I mean, it's good, I guess, but it's just not enough. It's not like a historical kiss on, during like racially charged times.
Look,
You know what I mean?
nothing is important in Star Trek, so don't feel bad.
There you go. Yes.
But tell me more about Sleepy Hollow. Like I haven't watched it at all, and I know John Cho was on it for a while. It's a very
Yeah,
diverse
I
show,
mean-
basically. And you have the old English guy, Rip Van Winkle or whatever, Ichabod
Oh,
Crane.
just keep going. You're doing a really good job.
But him, and then you have TV Zoe Saldana, and then you have Mr. Sulu, and you have the 7 Up guy from the Time Machine. So that's basically your cast.
There you go.
So-
There you go. Well,
You
see,
got it.
That
See,
is,
all
that
I-
is the Ben Tiefenthaler explanation of Sleepy Hollow. Thank you very much.
big shout,
We love
man.
you, Ben. But yeah, Sleepy Hollow. I'm sure if I watch it, I like it. I mean, I like history stuff. I like sci-fi, and
It's just,
Oh hell,
does
it's got John
revisionist
Noble
history.
in it. Is John Noble like the big bad guy?
Yeah.
Awesome.
He becomes like a really complex character. It's just really good. Like it's better than it has any right to be.
Yeah.
And it keeps. But I mean, I say that like lovingly.
No, I completely understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was definitely like a revisionist history kind of thing, but they like swapped every single like
Well, I
gender dynamic, race dynamic. Like there are a lot of, and I noticed like there are a lot of. Well, actually, there aren't very many white people to begin with, which is rad. And the person that they do have is evil. It's pretty funny. But I mean, they when they introducing new characters this past season, last year, it's like, oh, we have a new police chief because Orlando's on the run. Oh, she's this strong Latina, like, I'll fuck you up, no nonsense cop. Uh-oh, how are they gonna deal with that? And like, it's really refreshing that no one comments either on race or, well, it comes up sometimes, but it's done tastefully. Like when Ichabod wants to vote
Hmm.
and she's like, and he's like pitching a shit fit outside the place where they're voting. And she's like, basically, you need to step off. I'm really excited that I get to vote.
He
You just shut the fuck up because, it
so
was
so
pretty funny.
he can or he can't vote.
No, he can't vote. He doesn't have an ID. He's
Yeah.
not even
I
like
was
a,
just curious how they.
Well, but then he gets no. He gets testy inside with the voting people,
I see.
where
Yeah.
they're like, well, if you don't have an ID, you can't vote. And he's like, I'm a land paying. I mean, he falls back into his
Taxation
thing.
without representation.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
falls back into his thing, and she's like, you need to wait outside. Like,
No, that seems like
you
a cool
know.
show. So
Yeah, no, it's good. Like, I think it doesn't. It's not too preachy. It doesn't hit you over the head with like stuff like that. And plus, there's so much good character development. Like it, I mean, they just don't make a big deal about them being black, which it sounds bad, but like you said, like when it's not constantly commented on, it's just the norm. It's the
Yeah.
way it should be. Like this makes sense because blank. Like they didn't pick her because she was black. They just wanted to have black characters. Like it's just not. I don't know. It just you don't feel like it's an issue. They're not putting something there for you to look at and be like, "Oh, good job." It just made sense for the story.
right, picking
know.
the best actors available is always
Yeah.
the right policy.
And I think
And Star Trek's always had that policy. Like Cisco was not written as a black man,
Hmm.
right?
yeah.
they just okay.
Right.
Avery Brooks, yeah, he nailed it. Let's hire him.
Yeah.
So
Ooh, I wonder if that happened with Sleepy Hollow. Now that you make me want to look it up, but probably
yeah.
they've played that pretty well. I was worried season 2 would be shitty because heroes. It's hard to follow a really good first season.
Yep.
But there was no writer's strike to fuck this one up. So
Well, see, people blame the writer's strike. That's a scapegoat, I think. But-
see, I totally agree with
Yeah.
you, but try arguing that with anybody, and you're in for like 15 minutes
God
for
forbid.
their opinion.
just keep
Yeah,
keep that
no.
opinion to yourself while you're on the internet, folks. But so Lance, what's your big
Yeah, Lance, lay it on
Mine?
us.
I want to kind of use this as an opportunity to talk about Milestone Media, Milestone Comics. It was a company that was started by Dwayne McDuffie, the late Dwayne McDuffie, and he worked at DC. He was a writer, and you might know some of his works because he was a writer on and a producer on Justice League and Batman the Animated Series and all that. And he worked closely with Bruce Timm in the '90s on all those things, and he saw an obvious lack of diversity within comic books at the time with their characters and and who was being seen and everything. And so he and some of his colleagues came up with Milestone Media and their own company where they were going to write stories about minorities and tackle minority type issues. And basically they worked with DC. They made they set up they had a really good business model and plan, and they set up their corporation, and DC would publish, but Milestone had pretty much all of their own rights. They could choose to do what they wanted. DC had no control over what characters they chose to create and all that other stuff. DC was just a publisher. They were just kind of a means to an end. Unfortunately, the company didn't last very long, but the impact was very very well felt throughout the medium of comic books, because that's kind of that's where I let my flag fly is with comic books, much like how Zach lets it fly with Star Trek. Comic books was my thing. So in the early '90s, when I see that there's this all black comic stuff coming out, I kind of take notice, and the characters were great. And it was just a cool thing. These Milestone most notably brought a Static Shock, and
yeah,
now
the
granted,
most mainstream. That's the first I had ever heard a
yeah.
Milestone. Yeah.
And so with Static, he was the most marketable because according to McDuffie, they wanted him to kind of be the flagship, kind of be the Spider-Man of the and fill that type of role, being kind of the figurehead of Milestone. And he was because he represented the youth. He was and had a lot of the similar type of things that Peter Parker did, but he wasn't Peter Parker, which I I very much appreciated. But yeah, Milestone, it got its most views and it got its most exposure with the Static Shock cartoon because that show lasted 4 seasons. A lot of people kind of don't know that,
And it crossed over with
and
it
it
was
did.
part of the DC animated universe
It did, and they
with the
find
Batman,
and
Superman, Justice League. He was in Justice
he
League.
was, and he becomes a member of the Justice League in the future. So Static was an important character. I personally think that like they had their best stuff with Icon and Rocket, and Icon being kind of like the Superman of the Dakotaverse, which is kind of what because their milestone, their city, their metropolis, if you will, was the city of Dakota, which is kind of in the Midwest, someplace, and he was he had the most history behind him because he came here as an alien a lot like Superman did, but he came here in the 1800s, and so his part of his backstory is like since he's an alien, he had alien tech that would allow him to take the shape of whatever he saw fit to survive. And the first thing that he saw was a black couple. I think it was a black couple, or it was just a black woman. And he became, because he was a younger person, so he just made himself into like a young black male, and she adopted him because in that time, it's like you see some random some random brother out there, like only a short list of things are going to happen to you. So back then, so he is like so part of his backstory. He fought in the Union Army in the Civil War, and he's in he has a long lifespan, so he's kind of he's seen it, lived and seen it all. And so when you finally catch up with him again in the 90s, he's a lawyer, and and where he is in life, he kind of represents a certain type of attitude. And when he meets Rocket, they clash a lot because Rocket was kind of they told stories of like of liberal view on an issue versus a conservative view on the issue because Augustus, who is Icon, represented that, and then Rocket was the young black woman who represented the liberal view because she grew up poor in the ghetto, and so they would clash a lot. But those two formed a really good partnership. They respected one another. He took care of her. She took care of him. They had a really great relationship, a really great partnership, and it was just a good thing for comics in general. You also had Hardware, who was another one of their flagship characters, one of their initial launch characters, and he was an inventor, kind of a Tony Stark type, but not quite. And he was just kind of fighting. He was fighting, white collar crime was kind of his thing. He had a tech suit, and the other flagship title that they had was the Blood Syndicate, which was they were basically people that got affected with powers, but they didn't go off and start fighting crime. Like their story was like they became a gang, and so they told stories that way, which was very which is different for the time. Like that kind of came out of left field. Nobody kind of saw that coming because you were either like part of some superhero team or fighting evil, or you were a bad team. But they're just regular people. They were just a gang doing gang type stuff. So lots of very original and interesting stories, and a lot of the issues that they tackled are very pertinent to the African American community. And so yeah, it had a very lasting impact on the whole genre of comics. It was very very cool stuff.
So
Cool.
when did they incorporate the Milestone verse into DC proper? Was that not? Is it only Young Justice that did that?
No, they had in
Because
2010
in Young Justice, Icon and Rocket and some other characters
and
appeared
Static, yeah, Static.
along with Superman and all those guys.
Yes, and now, but in as far as the comic books are concerned, they would kind of like did the whole will they won't they thing with it because they weren't ever really sure what to do. And there's enough of a fan base for it, but like there's still not enough for them to kind of like just make it all official. And they kind of did that in 2010. They did something where they acknowledged the Dakotaverse in the DC universe,
In the
and they did,
multiverse.
yeah, and they did some like some stupid thing where like only Icon and Superman knew about its existence because like that universe collapsed on itself, and that's kind of how they got rid of those characters, and so they officially put Icon in it. And then something happened at the end of Infinite Crisis that allowed Virgil to come over, so that's how Static became one of the Teen Titans for a while. But they really only played around with Icon, Rocket, and Static. They didn't really bother with anybody else. So which is unfortunate because like I would have loved to see Hardware, in like interact with Batman. I think that would be a really cool
Well, I
interaction.
think is DC is always reinventing itself, so you never know.
Yeah, well, they brought Static back for the New 52, but they canceled it after 8 issues.
Well,
The first 8 issues, like in the initial run of the New 52, after those first 8, they cut Static for some reason.
it's very unfortunate Dwayne McDuffie had passed away.
Yes,
Because he was the creative mind behind it. So I'm sure
yeah.
people are kind of hesitant to kind of pick up the mantle.
Yeah,
You know,
there's been rumors of them trying to get it started again,
yeah.
with some of the other people that created it with
What's the
him.
other guy? Who's the other guy that kind of took over for Bruce Timm? You know what I'm talking about? Who kind of does James Tucker?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean he might be a good guy to do that.
he might be, but I'm not sure. He's more on the animation side. I'm not sure if he's going to get into comics.
Well,
But it was just it was such an original type of thing, and it was such a groundbreaking thing also. And unfortunately, because I was asked if I would want to see Milestone come back again, I want to see those characters, but like in the DCU, because I think they have a place. And since DC kind of owns their rights now, since the company went under, DC kind of just took it. I don't see a problem why those characters shouldn't be used. In my opinion, I think that those characters should, like, more than just Static, should have been used when they relaunched, when they did the whole New 52. I'm not sure if I want to see like something like Milestone again, because I don't think it's necessary. I think with all the attention being put on on diversity, I think you can have a Milestone within your already existing universe. You just need
that's
you just
something
need
I was going to ask
do
you.
it. Yeah.
Like, is that? It's like, once again, it's like heart in the right place, but it's like, man, does it have to be separate? Like,
I agree. Yeah, it doesn't need to be.
Are we still separate but equal? Like, is that still our society? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and
Right.
I think because back in like 1993, it was necessary for them to be their own thing.
Yeah.
But I think now they should just, like, if they want to publish an icon book, publish an icon book, because
Yeah.
they can do it. Like, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. And which is why, like, I'm so excited for things with, like, for instance, like with Miles Morales as Spider-Man, for example, because I think that, like, I mean, that it just kind of opens the door for different possibilities. And also, and honestly, I think that's a way they can get around. Marvel can get around having a Spider-Man in their Avengers movies if they wanted to. Use Miles Morales instead of Peter Parker. I don't see I think that'd be excellent. I think that would be really, really cool, because I like Miles as a character way more than I like Peter Parker, and I've only been reading Miles Morales for a short period of time.
Ditto. I would way rather see Miles than Peter Parker.
and Nancy, to that point, you're a big Jon Stewart fan.
Uh-huh.
Why is he such like a important character to you? Why do you like him so much?
Because I love Green Lantern. I like the idea of your thoughts manifesting into reality. I spend a lot of time in my head, so it makes sense that I would like a character like that, where I've often felt like, if I could harness the power of my mind in a physical fashion, I would probably be unstoppable. But I can't, right? And I like that sometimes the struggles that some of the Green Lanterns, which kind of in the Lantern universe face, is like dealing with that spectrum of emotions. Like, I know people give the other Lantern Corps like a lot of shit, but I really like them.
No, I think it's a great concept, and and of course, credit to Jeff Johns for really actually like
Making it official.
making
it real.
that happen, because
For real, yeah.
because until he did it, nope, I don't think anybody really kind of ever thought how that would work, but he made it work.
He's a master of making absurdity make sense.
Yes.
That's what Jeff Johns does. But so Jon
true.
Stewart, I like Jon Stewart because he was
Yes.
quote unquote my Green Lantern. Because we all grew up watching Justice League, and that's that's
Right.
Green Lantern.
Yes, I agree.
So if you ever make a Justice League movie, Jon Stewart needs to be Green Lantern. Like,
I agree.
I don't give a
that was
shit that in
that was another-
1964
Totally agree.
Hal Jordan was Green Lantern. Okay.
Yeah, that was another missed opportunity by DC. Like when they made the Green Lantern movie, like that should have been Jon Stewart, because that's the one that people who were going to go see that knew.
Yeah, and it opens up, and not to
Yes.
I would say not to get too racial, but that's what this episode is all about. That opens it up to a whole new sector of the audience.
Yes.
It's like oh cool, go see your brother be a superhero, awesome. Like Hancock, I think is the only superhero movie with a black lead. Unfortunately, that Spawn.
Yeah.
Right,
Blade.
Blade.
Think
But
about,
I'm talking about like traditionally
Yeah,
superheroes.
no, yeah,
right?
I agree.
Like
I agree.
Blade, Spawn. I mean, these are not marquee. We're talking like mainstream, like superhero.
Yes.
And the Green Lantern could have, once again, DC just passing up opportunity. Could have made a Wonder Woman movie.
Oh,
nope,
totally.
not going to do it. You want to make a Green Lantern movie with Jon Stewart? Nope, not going to do it. It's like, what the fuck? Like, why don't you? Welcome to the 21st century.
Yeah, that was such because at that point in time, could you have imagined how freaking cool that would have been if it was just back in that day it was Green Lantern coming 2011 starring Will Smith. Can you imagine if they would have done something like that? It couldn't even be Will
God.
Smith.
But no, Will Smith is perfect. He's
I
perfect.
agree.
Yes, he is.
That would have been
because what is Green Lantern if it's not ID4 meets Men in Black?
Exactly. That movie made $10 million. Come on.
He's already made the movie 3 times. Just
remember, my dream Green Lantern is Idris Elba, but
he's gonna be too old, unfortunately. So
no, that man does not age.
Hey, I'm a big
He's
fan of Pacific
beautiful
Rim.
and perfect forever.
I think the Pacific Rim sequel should be a prequel chronicling his, let's see his, the lost adventures of Idris Elba.
Agreed.
But yeah, who knows who Green Lantern's eventually going to be in 2020 when the movie comes out. My God.
Well, and it's kind of I agree with you. He was my Green Lantern too, because it was just that time period. But, it was sort of he was, I don't know. Quentin, my brother had comics, but I wasn't really allowed to read them or touch them unless he was gone. And then I'd get into his comics and read as many as I could before he got home and, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think he's just so cool. He's so much better than the other Lantern. Than the other Lanterns. You just really respect the fuck out of him from day one on the job.
And nobody sounds more badass saying the Green Lantern oath than Jon Stewart.
Jon Stewart, I agree.
Have you seen much of Justice League Unlimited, Nancy?
Alas, no. Do I need to watch that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yes.
Damn it.
If you like Jon Stewart, you need to watch that fucking show.
I do.
Yeah, because that show basically he's kind of
he is probably the main.
He probably is the main character.
He's the one that goes through the most
how
change.
I missed this?
For shame, Nancy.
I would argue he was the main character.
Well, he goes through the most change because
that.
Batman is always going to be Batman.
Yeah.
Superman is always going to be Superman. The Flash is comic relief, right? Martian Manhunter is just too fucking weird. Right, so who does that leave? That leaves Hawkgirl.
Hawkgirl, and Wonder Woman had the best stuff to do.
No, I'm serious because they are characters who the general public is not familiar enough with, that they can do whatever they want with them, and people aren't going to be writing them letters complaining like, "That's not Superman, that's not Batman, he would never do that." Nah, oh, Green Lantern, cool. I didn't even know he was a character, but whatever they did with him was pretty cool.
No,
well, no, that's the general public, But no, the whole emotional core of a lot of Justice League is Green Lantern and Hawkgirl.
Yes.
Oh man,
you should be ashamed of yourself, Nancy. Shocked.
Remember, I have liked comics for a long time. I could never had time to get into them. I was always doing something else. I didn't have friends who were into it and made me read them, etc.
Well, we don't force our beliefs on others, Nancy. Excuse us. So.
Okay.
Well,
we'll have
I will
a discussion about that off the podcast.
As we kind of wrap up here, I would like to just spend a few minutes talking about some big epic fails and attempts to infuse African Americans into nerd culture. Now, one that strikes close to home for me and Lance, because this is one of the main reasons me and Lance are friends, is Smallville. I remember one of our first conversations was about Pete Ross, Lance. I remember that. And talking about Black Kryptonite, just joking about it.
Yes.
And then they made it a year later on the show.
Yeah, they did.
God. But so Pete Ross, right? Pete Ross is traditionally Clark Kent's best friend in Smallville, the city, from the comic books. So when they made the TV show Smallville, they're like, oh, cool, let's be diverse. Let's make his best friend black, which makes no sense because they live in Kansas, but whatever. So they cast Sam Jones III, and he was literally he is the epitome of a black sidekick in that show. He is hawking product. He's talking. He literally, one of the most face palming moments on Smallville is he's like. So there's an episode where he has to be a decoy, right? So he's a decoy for Clark, and they do whatever they need to do, and they show up at the hangout spot, and Pete is the DJ, right? And Clark's like, "Hey Pete, thanks for your help." He's like, "Oh, no problem, Clark, but I'd rather be DJ and decoy any day." And he hands him, I kid you not, I swear to God, he hands them the Smallville Talon Mix soundtrack, which is now available in stores.
Yep.
It was the worst freaking product placement I'd ever seen. And it was like, oh my God. So it got so bad, they didn't know what to, once again, their heart was in the right place. but they didn't know what to do with him. Like they're like, well, we can't make him a love interest. He's black. That's weird. I guess. I mean, that's their logic, right? Like
that was their logic.
So because in the comics, Pete Ross and Lana Lang eventually end up together. That's Clark Kent's his girlfriend in high school. So they're like, oh, we can't do that, But they didn't really know what to do with him. So they wrote him off the show at the end of season 3.
Yep.
And then they brought him back for one episode where they gave him Mr. Fantastic powers. Once again, oh my God, the worst product placement ever. The whole episode was a product
Stride
placement
gum.
for Stride gum.
Really?
Like, yes.
Really, you guys?
Yes.
Why did you do this to yourself?
It was 10 years, Nancy.
Why
10
did
years.
you? No, that does not. You guys, I've never.
Anyway.
Okay.
I don't give up on things. So, except for Gotham and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
But,
okay.
God, like it's such a waste. Another thing I want to bring up real quick is Samuel L. Jackson in the Star Wars prequels. What a waste!
Thank you.
Yeah.
What a waste!
Oh my
like,
God!
You cast you cast one of the most charismatic, like the movie version of Avery Brooks, right?
Yes.
I always say Avery Brooks is the Samuel L. Jackson of television, because he brings that pizzazz, the panache.
Yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson, one of the most emotive, charismatic, loud, characters in Hollywood history, and you have him play an emotionless monk. Right, basically. Like, are you kidding? Like, he should have been a Han Solo type.
Agreed.
And like, yes, you don't want to typecast him, but you get Samuel L. Jackson, you use him as Samuel L. Jackson. And he doesn't need to be like he was great in Django Unchained. Like, that's the most I've seen that guy act in 20 years. So he's always playing Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh,
like,
I know, right?
It's like you have him sit in a chair, and he's like, oh yeah, I get to use it. This party's over. Really? Like. I mean, the converse of that is Billy D. Williams as Lando, who is perfect.
Yes, agreed.
He played his cool self to like the best. He's like
of his ability. Agreed.
Wow, what have we here?
Yep.
It was stereotypical, but wasn't condescending. Like the guy was he was the administrator of this facility. He was in charge. So he was a cool guy, and
have to save Han.
I think he said Han. But I do wonder if that was like a Lucas was like, oh well, I guess we need to put some black people in Star Wars, because
Totally.
if you look at the first one, like, well, there's no black people except the main bad guy is in all black and he's voiced by James Earl Jones. Maybe some diversity is in order here, but even look at the prequels, like you get Samuel L. Jackson and no one else. Don't forget Captain Panaka.
Oh God!
Captain Panaka, who was not in episode 2, he was replaced by Captain Typho in episode 2 because he refused to come back unless you could read the script. And they're like, "Who the fuck are you? Get the fuck out!" Like really? Like anyway, just disposable characters. And then that one like X-wing pilot in Return of the Jedi. He's like, ah!
Yeah,
that's the only other black guy. So. Major kudos for Lando, but come on. In the prequels, they really should have diversified it. And once again, use Samuel L. Jackson better. These are all just examples of failure, epic failure on the nerd culture front. Like I said, they don't go out of their way like intentionally to create these awkwardly stereotypical, un-PC situations. They just occur that way because they're just fumbling around with like the idea of diversity. But they don't know what to do with it.
The content is out there, people. You just gotta want to look for it, and then if you find something, check it out. It's really good. I will plug one more thing. There's a new series that's coming out. It's kind of documenting like the civil rights movement, and it's not called it's called The March, and it's very cool. There's 2 graphic novels out so far. I think it's a mini series graphic novel type of thing, but it is worth checking out. It's not by Dr. O. That's something else. Dr. O wrote Ragtime, which is another story featuring African Americans, and it's also my favorite musical. But I would check that out. It is probably at your local comic book establishment right now. It's by John Lewis. It's very good. It's the same people that they did a Martin Luther King one shot last year for Martin Luther King Day, and so now they're doing a new type of thing. It's by John Lewis, who's a congressman, and he is working on this book talking about the civil rights movement. It's very good. The March. I highly recommend it.
Excellent. I'll have to check that out myself.
Don't take our word for it.
But I'm done.
Nice.
Hey, it's LeVar Burton. It's Black History Month. Come on. like you said, Nancy, we don't play games enough, but you don't watch enough Star Trek or Justice League. I'm still shocked you haven't watched Justice League Unlimited. Where were you from 1992 to 2005? I'm ashamed.
Anime
Yeah.
is what happened to me.
There's some good shit out there.
It was exactly. Well, and there's always there's a lot of good shit. If you're really interested in looking and finding something at this point, it's probably been made. It may be hard for you to find, but someone has made it. Someone has thought hey, there should be this. It's not there. Well, fuck it. I'm gonna make it myself. So it's plus I love with stuff like Kickstarter. I can't tell you how many things I've backed that were I backed a version of Sherlock Holmes that
Nice.
was Sherlock and Watson as detectives, as African American detectives in Harlem, and it's
Nice.
fucking awesome.
It's a real thing.
So,
Very cool.
oh yeah, because Sherlock Holmes that's such a great premise. It's a good comic.
So
I have all of them.
I had a premise for how they had the all female Ghostbusters.
Oh, yeah?
I had a premise for the all black Ghostbusters. So really it's Tyler Perry is one of them,
Oh, no.
and then Chris Rock, and then Marlon Wayans Jr. Okay,
Wow.
and the Winston character is played by Seth Rogen because he's white, it's reverse. And then of course Paula Patton is Sigourney Weaver.
Oh, I love Paul Patton so much. Oh my god.
And God, who did I have as Rick Moranis? Damn.
This is good. This is good.
Chris Tucker was Zool.
Nice.
God, who did I have for Rick Moranis? This is
My goodness.
Forrest Whitaker. He could play a nerdy black man very well.
that
What
was
do you
it.
think?
That was it. Fuck. It was Craig Robertson.
Oh.
Robertson. And it was
Damn.
yeah, it was he
Nice.
was one of the Ghostbusters, and I believe I had I think Marlon Wayans Jr. was the Rick Moranis. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I
All
can see
right. I
that.
feel better now. God, I can sleep tonight. Now. I
That's
remember
the
that.
well, good.
Anyway.
So yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this episode. The content is out there, everybody. And if you ever want to, if you're curious about any of the content that's out there that's available, and you want some recommendations, you could always hit us up on Twitter or send us an email at nerdsexplain or nerdsexplainitall@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'd love to give you some recommendations on some of the things that are out there for you to consume. So once again, thanks for listening to today's podcast. I'm once again Lance.
I'm Nancy.
And I'm Zach. And remember, we don't break the news, but we do break it down. I expected you to help me out there, but it's cool. I got it.
No, I will let you attempt to break it down.
This is how I do it.
There you go.
This is how I do it.
By the way, I stopped watching Gotham today.
Oh, really?
Because
let me
I
say
just
this.
can't. I just can't anymore.
Really
because
okay.
I'm glad you brought this up because I wanted to
can't.
mention it at some point, like before or after the show. But I was watching, stuff on YouTube last week, and I saw they had some trailers for Gotham, like before the ads, before the the video you watch, and it was like, oh, the Scarecrow. Of course, it's the Scarecrow's dad.
Yeah.
But I'm like, man, it's Julian Sands,
Uh-huh.
who played Jor-El on Smallville.
Yeah, he
and I'm
did.
like, damn, that guy would make an awesome Scarecrow. Too
Yeah.
bad he's his fucking dad because it takes place 25 years
No,
before
I
Bruce's
just wa-
Batman.
Yeah, no,
But in the trailer,
I just
I'm like,
watched that
shit, he looks
episode
like a
today.
great Dr. Crane.
Yeah, I just watched that episode today and it was awful.
Really? It
And
was?
So,
Okay.
And so today, basically, I saw the preview for next week's episode, and it was just like, you've met Batman's villains, you've met so and so and so and so and so and so. His next villain, and he's no joke. And it shows some kid in an interrogation room starting to laugh. I was like, that
Oh shit!
is enough.
Is the Joker?
Like, that's enough. I can't anymore. I can't.
Oh boy.
Oh,
Like,
man.
no more.
No more.